Afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Mariners manager Scott Servais. There is a wireless mic that'll be passed around, so if you have a question, please raise your hand and we will get going. Scott, any opening comments?
Typically, I got something, but it's about the game that we just played. So we're into the second season, and really excited to be here. Our group is fired up. Long travel night last night getting in here, but you never know it today. Energy's high, and it should be. This is something we've waited for a long time and worked very hard towards, and we're excited. Our fan base is excited and ready to get after it tomorrow, so I'll take any questions.
What does it seem like today, just being out there on a workout field, knowing that what's ahead of you and that you're here in the postseason?
Guys are excited. That's the biggest thing, is you try to get, and we had our challenges getting through the last few games, trying to stay healthy. It's amazing when you get to game 163, the first game of the postseason, how everybody feels much, much better. That's adrenaline. That's the rush of getting out there, going through a workout, knowing what's ahead of us tomorrow, and the challenge that is ahead of us. I think the biggest thing, and all teams react differently to it. This is our first go around here with the Mariners in quite some time. Many of our players have never been in the postseason before. Fortunately, we have a few that have been. And, those are the guys you really lean on. That's who the other players lean on, whether it's the Carlos Santana's, Robbie's been around a little bit. They understand what it's like and the kind of the wave of emotion that goes on through a playoff series. So, again, the adrenaline's high. Our guys are ready to go tomorrow.
Scott, you were 29 and 39, I believe, at one point in June.
Yes, we were. Thanks for reminding me.
I'm sorry, but it got progressively better from there. If you had to isolate two or three things that allowed you guys to be where you are today, what would those be?
Yeah, it's a question we've got asked a lot here over the last few weeks, and we were at a low point in our season. And from my seat, anytime you get 10 games below 500, it's the danger zone because it's so hard to get back above 500 again. And certainly aspirations and goals are to get into the playoffs, and you have to get there. But you really got to take it a game at a time. But at that moment, we were in the middle of an offensive drought. We were really having a hard time scoring runs and specifically hitting with runners in scoring position. So, we had a very beneficial team meeting, hitters meeting. And I called the guys out and asked them to talk. I think it's really important that you listen to people and listen to our players, but you can only do that if you give them the platform to talk. And I forced our guys, what do you got? What do you think? What's going on here? And let it go. And I just sat back and let those guys discuss where we're at. It did not turn that day. I wish it would have. We got shut out that day. Okay, but I felt so good coming out of the meeting. And we got shut out. We went on a road trip, and we started to get it going. We won 5 out of 6 out of that trip, and towards the end of that trip, we got into a little bit of a brawl over in Anaheim. And I really think the combination of that meeting, understanding we were starting to play a little bit better. Now, when you come out of when you have a ruckus like that with another team, oftentimes it galvanizes your team. It really brings them together. And that's what I saw from our team at that point. And we started to roll. We started to do more things offensively, and our pitching really carried us. Our starting pitching has been so good throughout the year. And when you're in every game, and we play a lot of close games, we have an ability to figure out how to win them, and we won a lot of close games.
Hey, Scott, would you be willing to give us an idea what the lineup looks like tomorrow, and how close are you to finalizing that roster?
Yeah, I think the roster's pretty well set. We'll definitely release that and let you know where we're at, with that. I think the lineup, it'll be pretty similar to what we've seen all year long. There may be a little bit of an adjustment based on the opponent you're playing and what it looks like they have to offer out of their bullpen and whatnot. But, we'll post all that stuff tomorrow, and you guys will get a look at it in the morning.
Scott, when you watch the postseason, it appears that the bullpens take on added importance. Do you believe that? And could you talk about how your bullpen may be built for a short series like this?
There's not a team in the postseason that doesn't have a good bullpen. That's how you get there. You got to win close games. The Blue Jays have a very good bullpen. Every team in the postseason's got a good pen. I love our pen. It's really been the anchor of our team. It was last year, along with our starting pitching this year. It was a complete pitching staff effort that did it, but we certainly lean on those guys a lot. That group that we have continues to evolve, and you see the roles change a little bit. And I think we've been very creative in how we use guys. You try to get your best pitchers in the highest leverage spots. It sounds easy. You don't always know when those leverage spots are coming or the highest leverage spots coming. So it's got some challenges there. But when you've got multiple options, you feel good about who you send out there. And then I like our guys a lot. I trust them. their ability to strike people out, their ability to get head in the count, make pitches when they have to make them, and we play good defense behind it, and that's what it takes. So, yeah, the decisions you make, when to go to bullpen, how frequent to go to bullpen, is critical at this time of year. It really helps if you got a deep pen, and I believe our pen's very deep.
Scott, you said yesterday that Julio was made for the bright lights, that he revels in it. When did you know that he would flourish in such a stage? Was it early on in spring training? Was it this home run derby? When did you know that this kid kind of rises to the occasion when all eyes are on him?
You know, if you go back to Julio's season, certainly got off to a rough start. And I've talked often how impressed I was and how he handled things when they weren't going his way. And then they started to turn. And you saw the confidence grow and just take off. I think if there's a moment for Julio, I go back to, the first home run he hit down in Miami against one of the better pitchers in the league. He carried that on. He had a great series in New York against the Mets. I thought that series was a lot of fun for our young players. The environment at Citi Field was awesome. We ended up winning that series, and then it started to kind of take off from there. The home run derby, it surprised me a little bit that he handled it as well as he did, and not only handled it, he reveled in it. It was awesome. And I think, when you look at young players and what gets thrown upon them in this league, and certainly with an organization that we hadn't been in the playoffs in so long, but he puts his arms around it, and he's the guy, and I've often mentioned, he's the guy that grabs the flag, charges up the hill, and everybody runs behind him. He's got a ton of confidence. He's a great player. I'm looking forward to seeing how he reacts in this environment here, because I think it's going to be very positive, and he'll continue to lead our team.
Scott, home field advantage was talked a lot about in the end of the season in this race for home field advantage. Rogers Center hasn't had playoff baseball since 2016, and the last time it was pretty crazy with the bat flips and the walk-offs. How do you prepare such a young team, such an inexperienced team in the postseason to face that environment that should happen again tomorrow? Yeah,
it's a good question, and it's one you have to be aware of. I think you have to understand, or I make the comment to our team and coaching staff, expect the expected. There's going to be adversity. There are going to be things happen that maybe don't go our way. The Blue Jays have a very good team. But if you expect the expected, there's going to be momentum. Momentum shifts throughout the course of a game, an inning, whatnot. I think the most important thing is you recognize the moment you're in. We're in this moment. How do we get out of it? How do we turn the momentum back in our favor? And it's usually by doing the little things that allowed you to get here. Because if you try to do big things, it typically doesn't work well. You do the little things that allowed you to get here. And for us, it's having good at-bats. It's keeping the line moving. It's taking a walk, getting a single, trying to have, just have a good at-bat, and all of a sudden something big happens, and you get right back on top of it again. So I think the biggest thing, and you talk about young teams or teams that haven't been in the playoffs for a long time, you keep it small, you stay committed to doing the things that allowed you to get here, and you'll be just fine. So I think it's one of the things that I enjoy. I enjoy, being a part of the environment like this, and I know our coaches are excited, our players are as well. So we'll see what happens tomorrow.
Scott, that sweep that you guys had of Toronto in Seattle back in July was maybe the low point for this team. I'm just wondering, from the scouting reports you've gotten and the different, from what you've seen, how different a group is this right now from the one that you encountered back then?
The Blue Jays team.
Blue Jays team.
Yeah, certainly we haven't played them in a long time, and every team, you get so different as the season goes on. And we had a number of come-from-behind wins in that series. We did sweep the series. And I thought that was a series that was pivotal for our season, moving in the right direction. But again, the Blue Jays have a very talented roster. The lineup, a very productive offensive team. I think their bullpen has gotten healthier. They've been able to sort that out, and they've got a very good bullpen. The backside of their bullpens is one of the best in the league. There's no question about it. So, everybody, we played well against these guys early, or we match up well against this team. When you get to this point in the year, teams are so much different than when you were a couple months ago. So, they've had a heck of a run. To the question earlier, they were able to secure home field advantage. Is it an advantage? Yeah, it's an advantage, no doubt about it. But I've said about our team, we certainly respect everybody. We don't fear anybody. And I think that's fair to say. I think a lot of teams would say the same thing. So we're looking forward to it. Jay's got a good club. We got a good team.
Hey, Scott, you obviously have Luis going tomorrow. You have 4 starters Can that change how you slot it out from 2 to 3 games, 2 to 3, or have you locked in on who you want to start 2, and if you have to start 3, how do you want to do it? Or could the results of Friday change what you want to do with your starters?
Yeah, it could. I think right now, we're lined up. We'll certainly go Luis Castillo tomorrow. The plan right now is to go Robbie Ray after that, and then Logan Gilbert in Game 3. That could change. That very well could change. We also have George Kirby in the wings, and George has had a fantastic season. Rookie year, he's been one of the better pitchers in the American League here the last couple months. So, he will play a role in this series. At what game, what juncture he will insert himself in, I'm not quite sure yet. The game kind of tells you. But between George and the rest of our bullpen, our starting rotation, the strength of our team is our pitching staff. There's no question about it. And, got a lot of confidence in any of the guys we put out there.
Scott, you were just talking about how different teams are over the course of time. So how different are you from the last time the Blue Jays and their fans saw you at the first week of July?
Yeah, we're quite a bit different. We have a right fielder now that was out almost 4 months of the season, and in 2021, Mitch Haniger was probably our most productive offensive player, and we missed him for almost the entire year. He is back, he is healthy, he's ready to go. And every team deals with adversity. You lose players throughout the year, but that's probably the biggest difference with our club is you take and insert him in the middle of our lineup. And you're looking at our team, there's always going to be hot and cold streaks with certain players offensively and how they're going, but I think the other thing that has really emerged is our catcher. Cal Raleigh has had a phenomenal 2 months. What he's done with the bat in August and September, the late game home runs, we certainly saw a big one Friday night to get us into the postseason, but those two guys playing a pivotal part in our offense is different than maybe what we were like last time we played the Jays.
Here in Toronto, the talk all season has been about they missed by 1 game last year, and that served as a huge motivation. You guys missed by 2 games last year. Here we haven't heard you talk about that, but how much did that serve for your 2022 season?
For our team, it was a big push to get us where we're at today, and it really ended with our season at home. The last 3 games or 4 games we played at home last year, I believe there was 45,000 people in T-Mobile Park. And our players hadn't experienced that before. And I think, they talk about, back in the day when the Mariners were rolling, the late 90s, early 2000s, and what the city was like and the fan base was like and how rabid they were. They loved baseball. And it flipped a little bit, certainly with football and the Seahawks and what they had done in town. But what stood out for our players, and certainly me, was how passionate our fan base was that last series. They all got behind it. Remember the game? They're holding the Believe signs from the Ted Lasso thing. I mean, that was kind of the theme for our team last year, was to continue to believe. And I know a number of our players felt that. A number of them expressed it publicly at the end of the season that we were going to get, so to speak, break or end the drought. In so many words is how they put it. But and it was a rallying cry, I guess, for our team all year. And once we got close to realizing that we were going to put that behind us, I think it's super important to focus on the ultimate goal. Here's to win a World Series, and to do that, you got to beat the best teams. And sometimes you have to do it in their ballpark, and that's what we're ready to do.
Scott, you referenced the strength of your pitching staff, specifically with Luis. How good do you feel sending him to the mound in a Game 1 tomorrow when the opposing team is the caliber it is, the opposing starter is the caliber that he is? How good do you feel sending Luis out there?
I feel very good, and a thank you to our ownership group and our front office for trading for Luis Castillo and then signing him long term. Any manager in this game understands the value of high-end starting pitching. It just gives you a chance to win every night. And Luis certainly does it. He's got the ability to go down and shut down any lineup in any given night with his stuff. And it's not just his stuff. There's a lot of guys who throw hard and have great movement. It's his competitiveness behind that. He wants to be the guy. He revels in that. He enjoys it. We quickly saw it when we acquired him. His first outing for us was against the Yankees in New York, and he went out and dominated the game. And he did it again against them a week later in our ballpark. So he likes the high-end competition, and he's certainly got the ability to go out and execute a game plan and keep his emotions in check along the way, which is really important. But I couldn't be any more confident in sending anybody out there. Any of our starters, really, I feel really good about it. But when you have a high-end guy like that, the fact we traded for him, we just signed it a long-term deal. It's perfect timing.
And we're going to take one more question for Scott. Luis is waiting outside. We'll bring him in, and then we'll have Jerry Dipoto after that. So,
on the heels of that, in what you were glowing about Luis too, did you know that about Luis Castillo, or is that something you learned along the way, or can you give us even more insight about what you've learned about the guy you're going to have take the ball in game one?
Well, we do have a couple of his former teammates on our team, with Gino and Jesse Winker. And, when his name started to be mentioned in trade discussions, both those guys came to me and said, like, this is a dude. In player term, like, he's a dude, okay? And for me, now you start looking at video and you start looking at his stuff. I'd never seen him pitch in person before we acquired him. You'd heard the name, you look at the numbers, but when you start looking at it in video and how he executes and how he competes and how his stuff works, all the pitches work together, it's pretty exciting. And not only that, we've seen an uptick in his stuff since he's been a Mariner. The velocity's been as high as it's ever been for him. The movement on his pitches, all the metrics, they're trending in the right direction, and that's really exciting.
all right. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Luis is on his way in. He will have a translator with him.
Hello, guys. My name is Freddie Llanos, translating here for Mr. Luis Castillo, pitcher, Seattle Mariners.
You've been described by your teammates and your coaches as a big game type pitcher. Where does that come from, and what gives you such confidence when you go out and take the hill in such important games?
Varios de tus compañeros y entrenadores te han descrito como jugador hecho para los grandes juegos, los juegos más importantes. ¿De dónde viene eso? ¿De dónde ha salido así que tú has tenido esa mente de salir a dar todo?
Bueno, gracias a Dios esa es mi naturaleza. Y eso es lo que viene cuando tengo la mente positiva, no querer hacer de más en el montículo, siempre la mente positiva y dar lo mejor de mí cada vez que vaya al terreno.
It's just something that's come natural to me. It's just who I am, just a positive mentality, just stay calm out there and just go out on the mound and just do the best I can to do.
Luis, Scott was just in here and he talked about since the trade that he thought your stuff has played up a tick, whether that means an increase in velocity or maybe sharpness of the secondary pitches. Does he agree with that? And does his stuff feel and look a little different than it did when he was with Cincinnati in the first half?
Scott acaba de estar aquí y dijo que parece que tus picheos han mejorado un poco, ya sea velocidad o tus otros picheos ya han mejorado. ¿Tú sientes que eso es el caso? ¿Y cómo sientes tú que estás pichando ahorita de cuando pichaste en Cincinnati?
Bueno, lo importante es la salud. Lo importante es la salud, que así mismo estoy saludable. Y sí, los picheos han mejorado un poco más. He puesto un poquito más de confianza sobre ellos, por eso he tenido esos repertorios. Y siempre lo mismo, la misma rutina, lo mismo todo. Lo importante es que he puesto un poquito más de confianza a los picheos y por eso están así.
Well, the first thing is I'm happy to be healthy, that I'm healthy. That's the most important thing. But I think the main key here is confidence. I've had a lot of confidence in my pitches, and I think, that maybe my pitches have been a little better, and all due to confidence, which has helped me keep that repertoire and just kind of improving on my stuff.
Luis, how have the Mariners helped impact that? Have they helped you tap into it, whether it's their analytics department or Woody, the pitching coach? Just how have they kind of helped you?
¿Cómo te ha ayudado a los marineros en que mejoren tus picheos? Ya sea si serían las partes analíticas o incluso Woody, el entrenador, ¿qué ha sido la parte de los marineros que ha jugado en eso?
Bueno, ya eso viene de parte mía. De parte mía, como dije anteriormente, la confianza, la mente positiva y tirando los picheos, porque si más lo tiramos, más le ponemos confianza. Pero gracias a Dios he caído en un equipo que miran en la posición que estamos y ya lo que tengo que hacer es tratar de ayudarlo mucho más, ya que pertenezco a este equipo y voy a durar un tiempo aquí también.
Most of that comes from me, like I said before, confidence. The confidence of just throwing these pitches, the more you throw, the more confidence I get to build up. And fortunately for me, I was able to come to this team that they're in a good position, and I was able to step up my game and just do the best I could to help this team advance as much as I can.
Luis, what do you remember of facing the Blue Jays with Cincinnati here earlier this season, and what will you take from that outing and apply tomorrow?
¿Qué aprendiste de la última vez que enfrentaste a los Blue Jays cuando estabas con Cincinnati? ¿Qué aprendiste y qué vas a tomar de ese juego, de ese encuentro que ya tuviste contra ellos?
Bueno, sabe que ya es un juego diferente porque la primera vez que me enfrenté a ellos era un juego normal, pero ahora un juego de playoff que equivale mucho más la confianza, la mente positiva, tratar de hacer el 100% en la lomita. Y yo principalmente cuando voy a la lomita, yo lo que hago es mi mentalidad para sacarle el bateador de out. Eso es lo que yo siempre he tratado de hacer y normal, esto es un juego normal y solamente hay que disfrutar el momento.
Well, first of all, it's a different game. Last time I was here was a regular season game, and now it's postseason, where confidence can play an important role here. And even when, like I said, when I go up on that mound, I'm very confident. My mind is always positive. So, like I said, I'm going to treat it as a normal game, go up there, keep my positive mind, and just do my job.
Luis, when you pitched in the postseason for the Reds, there were no fans in the stadium. Did it feel like a postseason game when you played in that? And now you're going to have 48,000 people here. You seem to like pitching in front of big crowds. I mean, how much difference will this be?
La última vez que tú lanzaste en un juego de playoffs, no había fanaticada. Ahora va a haber una fanaticada arriba de 40,000 espectadores. ¿Qué vas a sentir tú diferente? Porque parece que tú mejoras cuando hay un gran grupo viéndote.
Sí, para mí es muy importante, ya que gracias a Dios podemos compartir con los fanáticos. Tuvimos en 2020 esa temporada que sin fanáticos lamentablemente, pero gracias a Dios ya pudimos, o ya más o menos el mundo se arregló y podemos compartir con los fanáticos, pero muy emocionante al ver los fanáticos aplaudiendo, haciendo la bulla, dándonos más energía. Y me siento contento por eso. Es diferente, muy diferente.
Unfortunately for us, the last time I did it, we were in a whole different situation where the stadiums were closed, but now we're lucky enough where, these stadiums are back open, and the fans for me is very important because the cheering, the noise is something that I really feed off of. It's something that gives me a little more energy, that little more something when I'm up on the mound. So, yeah, like you said, it's going to be different. It's going to be a lot different than my last game.
What are some of the best environments that you have pitched in over the course of your career, and obviously including this year as well?
¿Cuál ha sido uno de los mejores ambientes tú que has pichado a través de tu carrera o incluso este año?
Bueno, el ambiente muy bueno fue cuando yo por primera vez piché allá en la casa en Seattle. Al encontrarme con esa fanaticada tan grande allá fue muy emocionante y son cosas que me ayudan y me dan más energía para seguir batallando.
The best environment I've ever been was my first game when I first started in Seattle. That was one that really stuck out to me. It was one that I remember just being so electric and me feeding off it and giving me that little more energy while I was up on the mountain.
Luis, the Mariners acquired you at the trade deadline to make starts like this, and there were a lot of other teams that were interested in you. Can you kind of take us back to what your reaction was when you found out that you were going to be pitching in Seattle after the trade deadline?
Cuando Seattle cambió por ti, era para que comenzaras en juegos como estos. ¿Nos puedes tomar un poco de lo que pensaste tú? Porque había más equipos detrás de ti. ¿Qué pensaste tú cuando te llegó la noticia de que Seattle había cambiado por ti?
Bueno, me sentí bien, como he dicho anteriormente, ya que aquí, como en los Marineros, hay está Suárez, está Winker y Casali que jugamos juntos en Cincinnati. Me sentí muy bien al venir otra vez a compartir con ellos, y cuando me dijeron la noticia que era para acá, para los Marineros, y vi que estábamos en pelea, y gracias a Dios estamos aquí en pelea todavía. Me siento muy contento haber sido parte de ese grupo, de que pudimos ayudar al equipo para llegar a esta etapa donde estamos.
I felt good. I felt good because I remember at the time there was teams interested, but when I heard about this, obviously I had Suarez here and Winker, and then Castillo joined later, who I all played with in Cincinnati, so that was helpful to kind of adjust here. But like I said, it's been great being around this group of team, and I'm just proud of them.
All right, President of Baseball Operations, Jerry DiPoto. They all have microphones, Jerry, so go ahead.
Hey, Jerry. You guys have certainly checked off one monumental box this year by getting back to the postseason, but I'm really curious about, holistically looking at this a little bit bigger in terms of building a sustainable winner, which you've talked about over and over again, and you guys have certainly made some moves this year to hopefully ensure that. Can you kind of talk a little bit about not so much this season, but at least, this maybe being the part of something special moving forward?
Yeah, I guess from the very start, anything you do from, as a player, as a staff member, as a front office member, it's just a series of small steps, and this is just the next step. And we always talked about the sustainability of the roster being the focus of what we were doing, and we have a fun young team. So many of the players that have driven this team all year long are young, or they're young veterans, or they're guys that are in the primes of their career and performing like players in the primes of their career. So I'm very excited about where it goes from here. If I just look at the weekend, when we played our clinch series or clinched the postseason last Friday night, it's Logan Gilbert, who's 25 years old, starts that game, and Matt Brash, comes in behind him, and Cal Raleigh hits the home run, and these are all young players that have essentially grown up in our system or been born there. And you throw into that Julio Rodriguez and Jared Kelnick and the group of guys in our bullpen, any number of those guys, Andres and Penn Murphy and Matt Festa and Eric Swanson, who's sneaky been here a while but still young, and the same is true of JP and Ty Crawford. It's such a young, fun team, and we think this is just the beginning of what we're capable of.
Jerry, Scott said the other day that Julio was born for the bright lights. He's made for the bright lights. When did you know that he reveled in these kind of moments, and what was there a moment where you said, okay, this guy can handle it, or this guy lives for this kind of thing?
I do think that it was pretty evident when he was still a teenager that he lived for these kind of things. It was, his first major league camp. I thought he showed up and really stood out, and he wasn't shy. He was very brash in how he went about it, and in a fun and good way. And I've said this not just about Julio, but about our team in general. These guys like when the light shines. Our team doesn't shy away when people turn to watch them play. They like that. And the more people, the better it seems we respond. And that's why I'm really excited or optimistic about how we show up in the postseason, despite the fact that we haven't done a lot. And Julio just has that gene. And I've told this story before, and I think you've heard me tell this story before. In spring training, when we were sitting in the dugout after, I think it was the very first BP session, and Julio's holding, the bat that he ended up using in the home run contest in Dodger Stadium, and I asked him to see the bat, and it's a pretty cool looking bat. It's kind of unique, and the aqua or teal look to it, and I said, yeah, they made it especially for me. And I said, and then he turned around to me out of nowhere and he said, do you think I can play center field? I said, I think you can. He said, I love when people don't think I can do something. And I said, I don't think you could do 30-30, or win a Triple Crown. And he grabbed the bat back from me and he looked up and he said, all right, you're on. And I'll tell you what, if he didn't have a couple of setbacks physically, the 30-30 thing would have been a reality. He had a remarkable year, and he accepts every challenge, and when the light gets brighter, he seems to shine even more. So this I think is going to be the first of what are going to be many opportunities for him to shine in this environment.
Jerry, a lot of people have said the Mariners are a team that's built to win in the postseason. Do you agree with that, and how much of that is by design when you were building the team?
Yeah, I think it's all by design, if I'm being honest. You want to build a championship team, and when I got here, we had the base for a championship team. We had real power in our lineup. We had the star power at the top of the rotation with Felix, and then we had the stability and consistency with Kuma And then the upside potential, guys like Pax and Taiwan. The year, almost immediately thereafter, it really changed for us. We became more of a softer throwing, strikes-oriented pitching staff with, you know, an aging but powerful lineup that was a little bit more mercurial. This team, as we've developed through the minor leagues, as we've identified trade targets, as we've picked up, you know, this roster, which is entirely different than it was, you know, those years ago. It's about power, and we have power arms throughout the rotation. We have power arms throughout the bullpen. We have power up and down our lineup. And if I had, we're not I would say a gifted bat to ball, hit for average team. But I think people would be mildly surprised, if not shocked, if they looked and saw how often we walk and how frequently we homer. You know, so in that way, we're a pretty modern offense. You know, I think we're second in the American League in walks. We're one of the top 10 home run hitting teams in all of baseball. And the power is distributed throughout the lineup. You know, we've got a bunch of guys that can hit out of the park. And then you've got the Luis Castillos and the Robbie Rays and the Logan Gilberts and the George Kirbys who can run out there and give you a chance to win with power, bat missing type stuff. And then a bullpen that can come in and do the same. So I do think that's the recipe in October is big time pitching with power arms and guys that can hit the ball out of the ballpark, because you're not going to string together many 5 or 6 hit innings in the postseason to generate those runs.
Jerry, Scott mentioned that you guys have kind of figured out what the roster is going to look like. You won't unveil it until tomorrow, but just how much goes into that? How much scouting, how much preparation, and how challenging is that, especially given some of the injuries that you've dealt with over the past few days?
Well, a lot of it was going to depend on who we were playing. You know, the matchups were first and foremost. Player health, you know, was next. We've been talking about this now for, you know, in advance, truly, of clinching. We had been talking about the way the roster would look, and knowing that a 26-man roster, we were going to have 22 or 23 of those spots that are self-evident. They kind of take care of themselves if everybody's healthy. And then lo and behold, with the injuries to Hags and Wink, you know, it wasn't as simple as you might think. The good thing is we got so much exposure for a lot of players throughout the season. Guys like Jared Kelnick and Taylor Trammell and Abraham Toro, who weren't with us all year long, did get a lot of exposure. So, you know, we do feel like we have some depth to lean on. And, you know, the biggest challenge for us was figuring out, you know, who was going to be healthy and how best we would match up. And, you know, Toronto they're tough, and they're a very right-handed team. You know, from the starting rotation to the bullpen to the lineup, it's pretty right-hand heavy, and it's gonna, our ability to run right-hand pitching out there and try to balance the lineup with left-hand bats, you know, is going to be the key to us competing in this series and hopefully coming out on the other side.
Jerry, Scott was just mentioning how last year's finish kind of motivated him and the players. For you, just considering the way the season ended last year, how did that factor into how you wanted to construct the team this year and what you're seeing the results of, so to speak?
You know, I think the biggest thing was how excited our city was by the way our team played in 2021, and, you know, especially down the end as we were, you know, pushing to get into the postseason, and it was manic at the ballpark for that last homestand, especially the final weekend. And then when you took a breath and you look back and through all the excitement, you realize we're a really fun young team that has a lot of holes, and, you know, and we had to go fill those holes, and that's the way we approached our offseason. Not by viewing our team as we're a 90-win team, we're naturally going to go out and improve. We understood that we needed to go out and add to this team, and had those conversations with a handful of our players that had been around our club, had those conversations with the staff down in the clubhouse, and then we went out and did that thing. You know, we added Robbie Ray, we added Adam Frazier, Gino and Wink came from Cincinnati in the spring once the lockout ended. And I think when Gino and Wink showed up in spring training, and many of you were there, our group took it. They went to a different place emotionally. The excitement on our team, the joy that they felt every day in spring training. They thought we had, you know, a playoff quality team on the field, and you know, we were just trying to build off of that excitement that finished our season in 21. And I think that was the moment where our players knew that we were legitimately better moving forward, and they were excited and ready to do what we've now done. And I think once we picked up Luis Castillo and Matt Boyd and Casale at the deadline, we're further, enforcing or reinforcing our roster. I think our players now believe we can go out and win the World Series, which is our goal.
Jerry, what can you tell us about Cade Marlowe and his skill set and how he might fit in the roster construction here?
Cade, he can play defense, he can run, and he hits. He's got power. He's a sneaky good prospect. He's consecutive years in the minor leagues. I think he's, if he's not the only, he's one of the only players in the minor leagues to have back-to-back 2020 seasons. I think he's the only one to have 20, and 100 in terms of his RBI. And Cade is he does a little bit of everything. And this was an easy choice for us just based on the quality of his defense and the fact that he's a plus runner. And in the postseason, those are really key things to have in terms of bench impact. I don't know that you can make more impact off a bench than being able to put a plus defender out or someone who can go steal a base. And Cade can do those things, and he can also hit the ball over the fence. So pretty good player. We think he plays a part in our future, and this was as good a time as any to have him with us, whether it be as a taxi squad member or on the roster, because we think he has a skill set that can impact short series.
Jerry, just wanted to go back to the extension for Julio Rodriguez, and it's something that's been talked about here. I'm just wondering, when your considerations, how much were you looking at market trends and how the industry was treating young players of his caliber in making that decision versus looking at it in a vacuum to your situation and the player specific?
I think it was more the latter than the former. We're always cognizant of what the market's doing and trying to ride the trends. Since we started our roster redo back in 2018, we have been fairly aggressive in trying to, either making offers or signing players to extensions, and we've been in some cases successful doing that. And with Julio, we made the same decision. We want him to be around, and then the uniqueness of Julio, his talents, his personality, what we think the upside potential is. And it's funny, he's in the midst of, I think he wound up having a 5+ win season at 21 years old, and he can get a lot better. And I don't think we've seen the best of what he'll do, and trying to create a contractual model that allowed him to achieve what he should rightly achieve, while we get the opportunity to keep him with the Mariners over the course of what we think is going to be a long and exciting career, was one of the coolest things I've taken part in my executive career, and I love that we got it done, because he is, I think, he's a game changer in a lot of ways, and it's not just on the field.
Was there any influence from Juan DeFranco and bringing it back to that compared to not necessarily to teasing that way?
Yeah, some, but I think as you could tell by the final on the contract, it needed to be more unique than that. And I kudos to the Braves and Acuna for working on the deal that they worked on. Obviously, the Rays did theirs with Wander, who is pretty case specific. They were always one of the top 2 or 3 prospects in the league as they came through. They're roughly the same age. They were in the same signing class, etc. But at the end of the day, we did a deal for Julio that we thought, it represented Julio, and that was important. Otherwise, we just weren't going to get it done. And I don't think a simple here's a base contract with a couple of options attached to it was going to work in this case. The belief was, on both sides of the table, the belief was that we were dealing with the potential for something extraordinary because of his personality and a lot of his gifts off the field, in addition to what he does on the field.
Jerry, what's impressed you most about Luis since he's come over?
I love his personality. First, I love the fact that he sits at 98 with crazy movement, and he's got a wicked changeup and a slider that makes you miss. But you would never know when you're around Luis if he's hot or cold. You would never know if he's up by 5 or down by 5. His stability really brings. I think the fact that he goes by La Piedra, the Rock, is representative of how he operates. I think that is a crucial trait among the ace type starters, is that kind of buck stops here mentality, and he brings that to the table every day. And I think he's a great teammate. He's a quality person, and I love the fact that he rides the even keel. There seem to be no peaks and valleys with Luis.
Jerry, since JK's come back up this last time, it just looks so much cleaner, so much simpler. He said the genesis came by himself in a cage by himself, thinking about it. How important was it for you guys to be patient? He was putting up numbers, but wasn't making the changes you kind of wanted. It seems like he's a different player now and a more projectable player going forward for you than maybe he was 6 or 7 weeks ago.
I can't even express, and I've said this too, Jared. I am so proud of him for what he's accomplished. And sometimes you have to get to that aha moment and it is oftentimes just you, sitting in an empty room or in a cage by yourself when you cross that bridge. He has, he's pounded his head against the wall for a couple of years now, trying to force his way over the bridge. And it's not easy to go from being a super prospect to a good major league player. And he's periodically shown us that. I think this version of Jared, his pitch selection, what he's doing with breaking balls, the way he's identifying off speed, how much easier he's approaching his swing and just visually looks in the box. And I think it's affecting him in a good way. And he's from an absolute raw results, I guess, perspective over the course of the last 10 days. His raw results have not been close to how good his process has been. And in years past, his results always exceeded his process. And now, if we can get those two roads to cross, and I feel like we are one at bat away from those roads crossing. And I don't know that we have a player who has the ability to change what happens with the team in front of him any more than Jarrett, because of how gifted he is in his tool set. And now we see it coming together in a very different way than it had been before. And I'm really proud of him. He could go out and have a dynamic postseason and use it as a springboard toward becoming the big league player that he was always going to be, or he could just continue to adhere to a good process and excite us just as much, because this guy just turned 23 years old. There's so much baseball in front of him, and I can't express how proud I am. Yep. It's just doing the little thing and not grinding, not trying to pull everything, using the field to hit. He had an opposite field homer the other day in Seattle that it was gone the moment he hit it. Because when he hits a ball, it stays hit. Jared has that kind of power. But when you're grinding on the bat and you're overswinging and you're trying to pull everything, it doesn't really work that well. And what he did, he's just eased his operation. And I think his emotional growth this year has been more than the rest of his Mariner career combined. His skill set has always been, that's why he's always been one of the top prospects in baseball. And right now he's grown so much emotionally, and his psychological approach to the game, the consistency and an adherence to a process that is going to work. It's not a matter of if he's going to figure it out. He now has the key, and he just has to turn it.
Jerry, when you were talking about Marlowe, you talked a lot about his tools, but if he is placed on the roster, he'd be making his major league debut in the postseason, which is a unique situation. What have you seen from his makeup that makes you believe he could handle that pressure?
Cade's been a little older at every step. Some of that is by virtue of the fact that he was a senior when we drafted him. Some of it is by virtue of the fact that seasons were missed with COVID, et cetera. But pretty mature kid. Nothing really bothers him too much. He never gets too high, never gets too low. You spend any time around him, and he has that general vibe. If he is on this team when the game starts tomorrow night, he'll be nervous. There's no doubt. You're nervous if you come in playing for a team that's 20 games under in May. It's another thing entirely in a playoff series. But whether it was Wander Franco, whether it was Adalberto Mondesi a few years ago with Kansas City, now these are things you can do with players who can impact your game, especially when you're implementing them in a bench role. And we feel like Cade has the ability to do that, and he has the makeup to handle the stress of doing it when the stakes are the highest.
Anything else for Jerry? Thank you.
Thanks, guys.